Blue skies means fun days. Helping skydivers with tips and techniques about safety, training and fun jumping from those who know. Hi and welcome to Blue Skies Fun Days. Sometimes in skydiving things don't go as planned, and sometimes they go seriously wrong. From a skydiver's or drop zone's perspective, how do you deal with situations that could often be thought of as the worst? James Barrie, a former drop zone manager and now from Beyond Marketing, did a presentation at the PIA symposium on the best way to deal with the media, the respondents, and the stress this can cause to our fellow skydivers.
Presently in the skydiving industry, how we manage fatalities is a bit problematic because the operator usually knows what to do, but usually their staff does not. And when we come to conferences like this at PIA, maybe a lot of thought by the owners isn't put into what actually happens when a fatality occurs. When a fatality occurs, the owner or the manager of the operation are usually pulled away to the scene, usually either in the landing area or off-site. And there are now suddenly many blind spots that are occurring when you're away from the hub of activity of where people are talking or grieving or in a bad mental state. And because the authorities have been called, now the media are starting to take action. So the one person that is really needing to be sort of taking care of the flock, if you will, and also knowing how to manage, the medias are starting to look for questions, he's absent or she is absent. And so what is left is things start to devolve a little bit. So the messaging that I have here at PIA is, hey, we need to have an emergency action plan that is discussed usually at the beginning of every season and certainly reviewed. Everybody has a role to play and everyone needs to know what that role is. You want to make sure that your staff are operating as if it's a dirt dive. Everyone knows what the next point is going to be. And you need to have your book of blocks, if you will, always within arm's reach. You shouldn't be looking for your emergency procedures in a 3-ring binder on the bottom of the shelf in the back of the office. It needs to be in multiple locations all over. Just as we would approach discussions on safety, how we respond when safety goes wrong, if you will, it needs to be black and white. The information that you would need always on page 1 of, say, an emergency management procedure manual is certainly all the relevant phone numbers with the local authorities, the local civil aviation, or here in the US, your local FAA representative, even right down to the management or principals of the business that may not even be on site. So that needs to be very clear, along with the procedures. And sometimes we forget what procedures need to happen when we are in real time, because what happens to the brain, if you will, particularly if there is an emotional connection to the deceased on the drop zone, is you are overcome by emotion. And so rational, clear thinking isn't really linear. And there's a lot to be done in a moment of crisis between working with the authorities on site, knowing that the media is coming, bringing your community of jumpers together and discussing with them, the action plan that you're willing to execute. Getting all the students and all folks out there to watch, the spectators to watch, you need to corral them and communicate with them. There has to be some touch points going on. There's a lot of things to happen. You need to then call the USPA or the APF or whoever the organization is for parachuting in your country. You have to file paperwork and reports, and there's a lot to do. But that is very hard to think very clearly. So it needs to be step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4 of almost like a checkbox of things that you need to take care of. It's a lot. One of the things in your emergency manual of how to respond is with the media. The media are going to hear that there's been some communication over emergency services radio. that states that there's likely been a fatality. And unfortunately, this gets a lot of engagement and site traffic when this is reported on. So really the best way to handle this is you need to have a press release that really gives black and white factual information, very high level, not down into the weeds, not using skydiving glossary of terms that you and I are familiar with, whether it be swooping or canopy piloting or any of those types of terminology, just keeping it very simple. And the reason why it's so important is it's one source of information that's always consistent. The worst thing you can do to hurt your own brand as a skydiving operation is to have lots of people adding to the story, because the story gets legs and continues to grow. It's always my recommendation, don't get on camera. Don't say anything to the media when they call. Just let them know that you will be submitting a press release at X time. I will say that typically most operations are not prepared even with the template of their press release. And even that takes time to build. So it's really important that you build the template even beforehand so that you're ready. Final point, this comes down to preparation. In order to be prepared for the worst, you have to put preparation in beforehand. And that really starts with meeting with your local authorities. You need to have a relationship with local police, fire, EMT, ambulance services, because they're feeling adrenaline when they come onto the scene with, spectators and a little bit of chaos and the energy is high and everything to them is unfamiliar. You want to familiarize your local authorities with what they're looking at with gear and equipment. One of the biggest mistakes we see is police often will handle a fatality as if it's a crime scene. And yet the number one piece of evidence on this crime scene is the container and the parachute system. And what they usually do is bag it up and take it away, and a master rigger never gets to look at it before that even happens. And informing them, educating them that this really should happen before it's all taken away, that's part of education. And what this comes down to ultimately is communication.
Let's hope you never need to use the procedures you've put into place. But from experience, if you have them in place, you will be most grateful. See you next time for a cheerier subject on Blue Skies Fun Days. For more tips and techniques, click subscribe.